back to Orientation for Clinical Research. We're going to talk today about resource planning, which is how to plan out what you're going to need for any research that you might be doing. Now, you should be familiar with the concept of planning ahead, but with research, it's really important to make very complete lists because you don't want to get to a certain point in the project and then realize you don't have what you need or you're running out of time. So the first thing to talk about is your timeline. When you're planning your timeline, you need to divide your research project into tasks and subtasks. The major tasks would be the primary aims of your research, and the subtasks would be the pieces that have to go into that major task. Then you want to ask yourself, for each of these subtasks, how much time will it take, and what order do things need to be done in? Now, I like Gantt charts like this one here that plan out by month or by quarter how many tasks should be worked on and what length of time I think they need to be. Here you can see task 1.1 and 1.2 are sequential, meaning 1.1 needs to be completed before 1.2 can be started, whereas 2.1 and 2.2 can overlap a little bit. This helps me plan out how long is a project going to take and what pieces need to be done in what order, which helps me prioritize. This is often done, and my preferred way to do it is through backward design, where you say, where do I want to be at the end of this project? What tasks do I need to complete to get to the end? And you work back from there. So if I want to publish a manuscript, well, first I have to draft the manuscript. And in order to draft the manuscript, I have to get the results. And in order to get the results, I have to do the methods. And in order to do the methods, I have to get the grant funded. It's a very simplistic version of backward design, but it's a very helpful way to work back from any deadlines that you might have, such as an abstract submission for a conference or a deadline for a grant proposal due date, and say, what has to be done by what time in order to make these deadlines? Now, with budgeting, you want to figure out what exactly you need to pay for and how many of each you're going to need. So, things that you might need to pay for with a grant or with a research project would be people or time for people who work in your lab, either as wages or as salary. You may need supplies. Think about all of the supplies you need. Usually in a grant proposal budget, you don't have to actually list out exactly what supplies and what number, but it's helpful for you to do it, especially as you're getting started. Just think about what exactly supplies am I going to need? Think about services. Do you need to pay for a coder to create an app or to manage your data frame? Do you need to pay for computer time, for sequencing? Any number of things where services might come in handy. Do you need to pay for any data that may be behind a paywall or any survey instruments that are requiring a license to use? Do you need to pay for participant incentives? I have found that participant incentives really help with the recruiting. So if you have opportunity to pay for them, I recommend them. And then do you have to pay for publications or for conference travel? How much does that normally cost? And you build out a budget worksheet, maybe like the one shown here. Your institution probably has an internal worksheet that can help you with planning out everything that needs to go in. And of course, if it's an external grant, you're going to need to count on the indirect cost recovery or ICR, sometimes called overhead, and how much that will add to your budget. One of the biggest struggles with planning a project is that often grant proposals will limit the overall budget that you can submit, and that will limit the amount of research you're going to be able to do. So budgeting will help you plan for what you can or can't do in the course of this project. So a few gentle hints before we end this very short segment. First, everything is going to take longer than you think it will. Always budget yourself for extra time because sometimes things are slow. Paperwork often takes longer than you expect, especially if you need a data use agreement or a material transfer agreement, if you need an IRB or an IACUC protocol, build in for yourself the paperwork time. Preferably do some of those protocols prior to submitting the grant or while you are waiting for the results of the grants, just so it's done and it's ready because that takes time. You may need extras of certain supplies, so you should budget for maybe a little bit more than the absolute minimum, just so you don't run out if, for instance, somebody drops a tray of samples and now you have to get a new set of sterile tips. Some of the things that you may need don't actually have a cost, so standard supplies, printer paper, depending on where you are, you may not have to budget for absolutely everything. So you should talk with your institution's grant person about what needs to go into the budget and what you need to account for and what can be assumed to be provided for you. Resource planning takes a lot more time than it takes to talk about, but I recommend that you do this early on in the project planning so that you can actually have a reasonable timeline and budget for doing your good research. See you next time.